There's been a lot of misinformation put out on methylene blue in particular. And there's some people that I believe are trying to just kind of get some limelight because it's a hot subject. I was first introduced to methylene blue almost 20 years ago when a doctor friend of mine was treating his mom who had Alzheimer's. And I remember I was getting an IV at his clinic at the time, and I was looking at the IV bag, and it's like, what is that you're doing? They're like, oh, it's methylene blue. And it was just slightly tinted blue, which from what I know now, it must have just been a few milligrams of methylene blue, like a tiny, not even enough to move the needle. Which is when I asked him, like, is it working? Because he said, this is medicine supposed to help with Alzheimer's. And they said, we haven't really seen much of a result yet, right? And then I started following Francisco Gonzalez Lima, maybe this is like 10 years ago now, and his research using methylene blue along with different types of photobiomodulation applications. And that's when I started to experiment myself, and I usually will work with myself and experiment with myself before I start, experimenting with patients.
That's very noble.
Yeah.
I would say that's not the case for all medical practitioners.
No.
Yeah.
No.
They just get science and do it.
Yeah.
So what did you find when you started to play with the methylene blue yourself?
Well, I found it to be safe, and I found that there wasn't anything that happened negative, and then I noticed that my brain just turned on in a way that was so clean. It wasn't like a caffeine, it's almost like the paraxanthine is kind of in that same like field where I get this energy, which, and we're drinking Update drinks, shout out to Sean Wells.
Shout out to Sean. Yeah.
But we came up with the Satori, which is the bar that has the paraxanthine in it.
Those are amazing. And there's the alpha GPC in here, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And there's
Copa.
This, guys, if you're trying to fly, we had our Update taken, and I was like, there's no caffeine. It's for the kids. And the guy looked at it. He's like, no, we're taking it. Because, you can't bring stuff through security. You can take this.
Yes.
This is amazing.
Yes.
Like, shout out to you for making this. So, okay. So back to methylene blue, and then we'll go to Satori.
Sure.
So methylene blue is interesting because I feel like I learned about it from you 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
You were one of the OGs, and you learned about it 20 years ago.
Yes.
Looking back, what did you know for 20 years that you feel like society is just getting truth on now through Joe Rogan and everyone else?
With methylene blue.
With methylene blue.
Yeah. Well, the studies are ongoing. Some of the things that a lot of people don't talk about with methylene blue is its ability to work against microbes. So as an antiviral, antimicrobial, particularly when you blend it with light. In fact, at the blood banks, it's the primary way that the blood's sterilized is. So if anybody that's gotten a blood transfusion's actually gotten a little bit of methylene blue.
Whoa.
So they'll put a little methylene blue in with the blood, and then they'll irradiate it with red and near infrared light. And so that combination is very powerful. I've worked with well over 100 patients with very significant COVID with an IV protocol using intravenous red light and intravenous methylene blue. And it wasn't uncommon to see people in the middle of that IV kind of like start to sit up straight, like, what's in this stuff, Dr. John? Like, I'm feeling better. Is that normal? Could I be feeling better already? Yeah, you could.
Is there something to the color blue about methylene blue that makes it powerful because of its color?
Great question. So blue is blue because it's reflecting blue and it's absorbing red because they're opposites in their color. And so we absorb mostly red and near infrared light. And we use those photons to make energy. We have the ability to use photons to make energy. We have the ability to use electrons to make energy. We can, in fact, use either or both. And so the reason that we can use photons is we have this enzyme called cytochrome C. And this protein complex that sits in the mitochondria is, it's a 4-part protein, and they're named based on protein 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the 4th protein complex is called cytochrome, cyto meaning cell and chrome meaning light. And so we can feed photons into that system and actually get a boost in vitality and energy at a cellular level. And so that's why a lot of like near infrared and red saunas, people have like red light beds, different devices. They're all red, mainly because that's the primary color that can absorb the best into your body, right? The sun has a lot of that as well. So we absorb that and we use it, for our body to be healthier. So methylene blue absorbs the red. It acts like a sponge to just kind of like pull those photons into the mitochondria. So it has an affinity. So it gets into the mitochondria and then it acts like a chaperone to pull those photons into that structure.
So it's essentially a light accelerator is what I heard from you.
Yes.
Is that, obviously that's a civilian term.
Yeah, civilian. Yeah.
But is it a light accelerator in many ways, the methylene blue to the red in the body?
Yeah, amplifier, accelerator. It's there. It doesn't need to be taken together. Like, I don't want people to think like, oh man, I'm not going to get out in the sun today. I'll skip my methylene blue. You can take methylene blue with or without light.
Yeah.
However, when you take it with light, you are going to get a more powerful antimicrobial effect. So if you are dealing with something where you're sick and you want to use methylene blue for that, I would recommend, like a sauna, or if you have like some red light devices, I would put it over your wrists or your carotids. Because then once the methylene blue's in your blood, then you kind of want to charge that blood and those immune cells in the blood with the light.
Where can we go from here when it comes to nourishing? Let's spin the conversation to this place. This feels the most true for me. So we've already talked about some of the tools for the physical. How does maybe another tool like potentially the NAD or the Sandman, or what's another one that I use? I really love the squares. I do take the methylene blue squares. What's another tool that we can access the physical side of ourselves so that it can help to grow our capacity for the other sides of ourselves, the mental and the emotional? Is there a great tool that you've come across to start the physical, but it's really more about feeding the mental and the spiritual and emotional?
Oh, I got a great one here. And it kind of feeds into some of the questions you've had quite nicely. So one of the points that you had asked about the blue, right? What's the significance of blue?
Yeah.
So I want to bring that into the mix. I also want to bring in fear. I want to bring in breath work, and I want to bring in your question about, the emotional fitness.
Yes.
Right. And what things we can do.
Yeah.
Right. So there's an area in your brainstem called the locus coeruleus. And the locus coeruleus in Latin means blue spot. And this blue spot is the master control stress nucleus. It's the stress nucleus. And it's hardwired to the amygdala, right? And the limbic system. And so the limbic system is basically going to make sense of what is dangerous versus not dangerous, right? But then that limbic system has to trigger something to say, okay, if it's a stressful situation, then we need to elevate stress molecules to act on like a predator jumping out of the jungle to attack us, right? And what we need to do in order to accomplish that is norepinephrine. And that's like cortisol, norepinephrine. So in the central nervous system in the brain, it's norepinephrine. In the body, it's cortisol, right? The cortisol is made by the adrenal glands, which sits on top of the kidneys. Norepinephrine is produced in the brain, but the specific area in the brain that regulates norepinephrine is the locus coeruleus. And so that's why I say it's the master control stress system, because when we have stress, that's going to show up with norepinephrine, because that's when we're like, oh, holy shit, that's that holy shit feeling. It's really getting really technical and sciencey here.
It feels like holy shit. It brings us back to caveman days where there was a real threat.
Yeah.
But I would say 99.99999% of the time, it's just old wiring.
Yeah. It's all wiring.
We don't need to be in stress response to somebody cutting us off in traffic. Just be like, go in peace, brother.
Yeah.
We don't need that.
Yes.
But it feels in our neural tree.
Yes.
I hate the word nervous system. I'm not saying that nervous anymore.
The neural tree.
Yeah. It feels in our neural system, neurons, that there's this electricity that's creating a fear response in my life. And I don't enjoy it. So that's my work. It's all of our work to know that like we're safe. And the electrical system you have is really ancient, and it relates to this locus coeruleum in ways that I'm sure the methylene blue helps to downregulate? Does it bring us back to homeostasis or make us more sympathetic?
Methylene blue does work on the blue spot quite powerfully. In fact, they did studies with methylene blue and found that it strengthened that area of the brain so much so that when people went through phobia studies, like so people with phobias, with PTSD, say like you're afraid of like a spider, right? So what they would do with phobia cases is they would do exposure therapy. So they'd take a spider and they throw it on the table and say, here, and you're like, ah. And then the next day they throw it on the table, ah, maybe a little bit less of a and be ah. And then, you do that enough times, it's like, oh, okay, it's just a spider, no big deal.
Yeah.
And so what that's doing is it's rewiring that limbic system so that there's a new story, like the story that you were telling yourself about how dangerous spiders were changes.
How does it rewire the limbic system specifically?
Through experience, through activation.
So just by learned environment.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. So then that limbic system is going to trigger the norepinephrine depending on what it is, what it's signaled to do so, right? So if it's signaling, hey, this is like a danger situation, that spider's going to kill me, then there's going to be a lot of norepinephrine. If it's like, oh, you know what, that spider's fine, but just keep it away, little bit of norepinephrine. And then it's like, oh, interesting, spider, here, come here. Let me see if I can hold it in my hand. No norepinephrine at all, right? So there's scales to this. And so it all has to do with behavior, experience, and neuroplasticity, the ability to change, right? That plastic change in the brain is what gives us the ability where we can go in and change those stories and those narratives.
So the methylene blue goes in there almost, I mentioned this earlier, as an accelerator or a supporter of light, the biophotons. And then if we're pairing that with emotional practices like breath work, or just conscious relating, nonviolent communication, like telling our bodies that we're essentially safe.
Yes.
Because the body, Bessel van der Kolk writes in his amazing book, The Body Keeps the Score, that we can time travel. And this is actually from someone else. I'm forgetting her name right now. I'll remember it by the time I'm done. But our nervous systems time travel in moments that have no basis in reality. And they time travel because they were coded really early, much like for me when I was a kid or you in Hawaii. And they get coded. But the cool thing about coding is we can recode them. But with how much toxicity and how much stress is on our system, that's why I think supplements are actually a game changer. How are we supposed to operate in a world that our grandparents operated in when it's a totally different world? Maybe 150, 200 years ago, we didn't need any supplements at all. Yeah. Because the world was just a different place. But the reality, the honesty that I'm bringing forth, that I'm curious your feeling on and your awareness on, is that our environment and our unconscious beliefs and our emotional patterns, they hold us hostage and in many ways. And this is what I believe emotional epigenetics is all about. The epigenome turns off and on switches for the genetic code, but it doesn't change the genetic code. And the power of this and your tools, and I'm sure you've gone deep into epigenetics anyways, because this is your world, one of the parts of your world. The methylene blue seems like the best starting place. It literally seems like the best starting place. Is it? Is it the best starting place?
It's a safe place to start. Dosing wise, anybody that's starting with methylene blue, you definitely want to, we talked about my book. Would be smart to get my book on Amazon. It's Audible as well. The last paragraph or the last chapter is on, how to take it and, aspects surrounding that. If one was to embark on, looking into methylene blue and started to look on the internet, they're going to see some things that are very positive, mostly very positive.
Yeah.
And then they may find some things where people are putting out some negative articles on methylene blue.
Yep.
And I've looked at all of them. People send them to me all the time.
I bet.
And it's just a bunch of hogwash, really. It's like, I think people trying to get their 15 minutes of fame. But, we had pointed out one of the things that people will bring up, like, hey, it's made from petroleum. Well, we kind of brought that to the light as far as that they're organic compound. I mean, it's plant matter. Yeah. That it's ancient plant matter, but they're organic molecules and they're very shelf stable. right? But just because the origin of something doesn't necessarily mean that it's toxic because of that, because there's a lot of different molecules that can be made. I mean, literally an infinite amount of molecules can be made from that same original molecule. One of the other aspects to it is that it works on serotonin, right? And so that it does elevate mood, which is a good point, right? And one of the arguments people will say, well, that's why everybody feels better on it. It's just because it's working on serotonin, but it's not doing anything else for you. And I think one individual pointed out an article that was on rodents, and the conclusion was against methylene blue maybe working as powerfully on the mitochondria, but there's thousands of other articles that prove its effect. And with methylene blue, they've never found a molecule that works on all four of those. We talked about those four complexes in the mitochondria. It literally increases the functionality of all four complexes. And on average, it's about 30% of an increase in mitochondrial capacity, and it's independent of oxygen. And so individuals, everything from breath holding to, with free diving and so forth, great applications for like MMA fighters, and which I've worked with a lot of them, and they love this molecule. In individuals that might be looking for an added benefit to like an executive, to have improved brain function, right? To just be able to execute their job. People that are looking to mitigate the stresses of toxins, like the methylene blue has been shown to be neuroprotective. Like if you had a stroke and you're currently taking methylene blue, you wouldn't likely have much damage at all. In fact, there's a few of the absolute top neurosurgeons on the planet that I'm aware of that won't do surgery on individuals unless they've got a methylene blue drip going at the same time, because they know that their patients are going to be safe in case something happens. Same thing with the heart. If you had a heart attack while you're taking methylene blue, you're very much protected. There's another aspect to methylene blue that they'll show pictures of blue brains, and they'll say, oh, look, it's staining the brain. This is also confirmatory of how toxic it is and how negative it is. It's like, I like to know when I'm looking at something, okay, this plus this equals that. But like here you're jumping from, okay, so it's a blue brain. We know methylene blue has an affinity for the mitochondria. We know it's going to get into the brain. We know it should be blue, right? This idea that it's going to be permanently blue is kind of silly. What actually happens with methylene blue is that it converts into a white form of methylene blue, which is called leucomethylene blue. Up to 86% of all the methylene blue makes this conversion. And the leucomethylene blue, there's been a lot of research on it, and actually has some amazing qualities to it. And it might be one of the reasons that methylene blue works so well against viruses, is because the leucomethylene blue is a very powerful antiviral. It's very powerful as an anti-inflammatory as well. And it's the reduced form of methylene blue